Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha Shorts. In 1994, Radio 3 broadcast a series of interviews with Sir Arthur Steeb-Griebling. They played out over a week in 10-minute instalments to very little fanfare. You would be forgiven for missing them though, having been tucked away in the schedules. If you had heard them, you might have been slightly taken aback by some of the subject matter, as Sir Arthur discussed, amongst other things, his time as a POW in Japan and the role he played in the construction of an important railway line whilst there.
Now, this is when you were the senior British officer in a prisoner of war camp which was building a railway line.
That's right. And I think anyone travelling on that line today will recognise the merits of the technology involved.
And the systematic abuse and mental torture of his battalion.
You talk less about the fact that you didn't waste a single calorie of energy in making it yourself. You had nothing to do with the hard work.
I don't quite understand the question.
He also discussed his friendship with Rodney King.
I was trying to mediate between the police and Rodders. I've got to know him very well. He's a very nice chap. And we were having a Big Mac together, and the police blundered in to finish off the job they hadn't completed.
And the role he played in the 92 LA riots.
I like to think I mowed down as many whites as I did blacks, and the Koreans did very badly out of the whole deal.
His research into the discovery of the fossilised remains of the infant Christ.
So what are the implications then, if Christ was fossilised when he was that small?
He was practicing resurrection. Because if you're going to resurrect yourself in front of thousands of people and found a whole religion on it, you don't want to make a cock-up, do you? So from a very early age he was dropping dead and resurrecting himself. There's probably thousands and thousands of bodies of Jesus, and this is just the youngest one.
And even in a particularly candid moment, revelations about his addiction to crack cocaine.
Is it not true that the reason you won't appear on television is because a crack pipe can't be hidden?
It can be hidden. And I am willing to own up to the errors I've made. And if there's any young people listening, for goodness sake, don't spend £1,000 a day on crack, because you can get it a lot cheaper than that in Leicester Square.
The series was called Why Bother, and was in fact the result of a collaboration between two of the finest comedic minds of their respective generations, Peter Cook and Chris Morris. It was an interesting pairing. Chris Morris is often credited as the modern Peter Cook. He certainly takes the same approach to satire as Cook. His own very considered nihilistic humour mixed perfectly with Cook's free form and equally nihilistic take. In the latter part of his career, Cook's over-reliance on improvisation over written comedy was really down to the fact that, by this stage in his life, he was a full-blown alcoholic. Although he was still appearing regularly on television at the time, and was a great proponent of the new wave of alternative comedy that was emerging in Britain, his former comedy partner Dudley Moore was making millions in Hollywood, and Cook was carving out a niche on our shores as the godfather of British humour, appearing in the likes of Blackadder, Whose Line Is It Anyway?, Saturday Night Live, and even voicing the eponymous Roger Melly, the man on the telly, in a short-lived animated series from the equally nihilistic publication Viz. This meeting of minds may have been brief, but it is a textbook example of how to leave the audience wanting more. Cook's apathy and drink problem may have hindered him when it came to writing, but he was still possessing of a fine comedic mind. His improvisation skills were as sharp as ever, aided and abetted by Morris's own line of questioning, throwing in these curveballs with his Paxman-esque straight-faced approach, and his own wild flights of imagination.
Sir Arthur, your work with eels is very well documented. It's perhaps less well known that during one experiment you came very close to death. How did that happen?
Cook never once falters in taking up the reins of the improv and elaborating on Morris's outlandish conceits.
This fits in with your theory that, as Christ practiced resurrection throughout his life, he didn't do it flawlessly, did he? He produced several of himself at once.
Well, there was a time when he overdid it and reproduced 18 other Christs. So he had to wipe out 17 of them.
But he had to stop them resurrecting themselves once they'd done it.
Yes, he had to keep them underwater. I think Paul mentions it in passing.
Apparently there was many hours of improvisation produced, but in the end it was whittled down to a mere 50 minutes of brilliant comedy. It's a noteworthy series for what it represents, Cook proving himself to be the sturdiest bridge between the 60s satire boom that started with the work he did in Beyond the Fringe and the satire resurgence that took place in the alternative comedy scene of the 80s and 90s.